Hi everyone, welcome to Maximum Attack Rallying and to your Thursday dose of rallying gibberish. Today I want to talk a little bit more about Safari Rally. I know I did a review of that event earlier in the week, but I want to talk specifically about the route and some chit-chat that's been going on since then and how it impacts the structure of WRC events, because I think this is a really interesting topic and it's one that's been bubbling away in the background for a while now. Basically, for the last 25 odd years, WRC events have followed quite a strict format. That's been known as the cloverleaf format. So you have a central service and then the cars go out from that central service to do loops of stages. Obviously, those events tend to last 3 days. So you'll have the bulk of the mileage on a Friday and a Saturday, short day on a Sunday, and maybe a couple of stages on a Thursday evening if you are lucky. And we've seen talk, haven't we, about how we should maybe move away from that. And in the wake of Safari Rally, we've seen some of the drivers commenting on the structure. And I think this is an interesting topic, isn't it? You know, we're seeing new events. Obviously, earlier in this week, we got the announcement that Rally GB is rejoining the calendar next year, based in Scotland. We don't know anything about the route for that yet, so I will do a more in-depth video about it, but there's no really any point until we actually know what's happening. Obviously, there's talk that we're going to be going to the US in the near future. There's talk of increasing the calendar from 14 to 16 events. And it raises this question, doesn't it? What should a WRC event look like? And I think I would like to see a bit more variety. I will say that up front. I think this very formulaic Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday is maybe not the way to go. You know, I think there is scope to change things. I think the irony is, you know, we've had a lot of talk of this change, and we have seen events try and do things a little bit differently. We saw Mexico a few years ago. They tried to run a really long stage, but everyone complained about it. So it seems that some people want there to be changes, but when events try and do things a bit differently, people complain about it. You know, Saudi Arabia, they altered their schedule, so the rally ran on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because Sunday here is a working day. So again, it was a little bit different, and people complained about it. You know, again, Safari Rally, Saudi Arabia, was very rough and challenging. People complained about it. And even, you know, Safari last weekend, we've seen a few little comments. Elfyn Evans said that the organisers need to be a little bit more careful when considering which stages to run, particularly when the weather is bad. He said that there were times at the weekend where there was nothing that could be done. You know, that whatever you did, you would run into issues on some of the stages. I like Elfyn Evans a lot. I'm not sure I agree with him, because were those problems unavoidable, or is it the fact that the drivers don't want to slow down so much to avoid them? Let's face it, if you hit a rock at 2 miles an hour, it's going to be very different to if you hit it at 80 miles an hour. So a lot of this is around speed, and I think the drivers, the teams, and the events have become very, very focused on speed and on going as fast as possible, the events being sprints, and Safari Rally is not like that. It has never been like that, and I think you could say the same about Saudi Arabia last year. Those events, those types of events require a different approach. So for me, I get what Elfyn is coming, you know, I get where he's coming from. Obviously, there was lots and lots of rain, very, very wet conditions, and we do have to be careful. You know, if there is a safety issue, obviously we can't run stages if it's going to be dangerous, but if you are not getting through a stage because you're going too fast for the road conditions, that is not a problem for the event. That is a problem for you driving too fast for the conditions. You know, rallying is not a sprint format. It never has been. It's never been a sprinting sport. It has been about completing the route in the quickest time possible relative to the road conditions. And I think, you know, as far as Safari is concerned, it is one of those events that is difficult, and it should be difficult. And I think that is probably where the difference in formatting becomes really important, doesn't it? Because you can have your sprint events, you know, let's take Canary Islands, relatively smooth tarmac. That can be a sprint event, can't it? It can be short and sharp and really, really fast. Whereas Safari, Saudi Arabia, the Acropolis, those events are more difficult and you should go slower. So I would say that changing the days that the event runs on, or how the route is organised, or how you organise the loops of stages and all of that stuff is part of it. But I think the main thing is just having events of different character, isn't it? You want the championship to be made up of fast events, slow events, rough events, smooth events. snow, gravel, tarmac, all of these different conditions, because that's what makes WRC unique, isn't it? That is what makes it such a unique challenge, and in the view of us fans, makes it the best form of motorsport in the world. And there is a couple of things that have come up in the wake of Safari that I do think are worth talking about, comments from some of the drivers. The first of those was from Thierry Neuville. He said he thinks that the format could be changed, so you have fewer stages per day, but you have longer stages and you spread it over more days. So that's a little bit what we talked about, isn't it? And I think for Safari, that's fine. Like I said, Canary Islands, that can be your short, sharp 3-day sprint, can't it? Whereas Safari, for me, should maybe be over 4 or 5 days. You know, if you look at the East African Safari Classic, which is much more in the mould of the traditional Safari Rally, why not make the Safari in the WRC like that now? It's a shame that in the wake of all of these comments, representatives from the WRC promoter have said that they don't see that there's any reason to change anything, because I think you can say that Safari Rally in the last few years has been successful. You know, I think we're getting some absolutely fantastic images from it, but that doesn't mean it can't be improved, and I think there is room for improvement. And given the situation with the event right now, you know, we are in a position where the organisation of the event is going to change. You know, it had a 5-year contract, got a 1-year contract extension for this season. The government, who have been heavily involved in Kenya, have said that they want other people to take over, other people to invest in it, other people to fund it, other people to promote it. And things are going to change, aren't they? And I think this is an opportunity to do things differently. And I think maybe Thierry's right. You know, maybe don't have quite as many stages, have them a bit longer, have it over 4 or 5 days, and turn it into something really unique. Because, as I was just talking about, the strength of WRC is in the design and the uniqueness of the events and the territory and the terrain and all of that stuff, isn't it? The reason that WRC is so amazing is because on one event you've got cars driving through 3 feet of mud and water, and then on another you've got them low, scraping the ground in tarmac trim, going 130 miles an hour, 120 miles an hour, flat out on a twisty mountain road. So I think it's that is the strength of the WRC. And you know, speaking on the promoter, whoever comes in next, that is the most important thing for them to sell, isn't it? That is their product. That is the unique thing that they can sell to manufacturers, to broadcasters, to other media outlets, to influencers, and all of the people that WRC needs to reach out to. Then we come on to something of a sub-argument that has come about in the last few days as a result of all of this talk about the conditions in Kenya, and that is the introduction or reintroduction of Safari-specific specification cars. Obviously, virtually all of the Rally 1 crews ran into technical problems over the course of the weekend, and a number of the drivers have said that we should introduce Safari-specific parts to make the cars a bit stronger. There was talk about having different spec wishbones and things like that. I think Thierry Neuville said something about having a different bumper to try and prevent the issues of mud and things getting caught in the cooling pack of the i20. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Again, this is something that the promoter is very much against, and they've said that the cars should be built to withstand all of the events in their homologated spec. That said, we have seen a little bit of deviation from that, haven't we? Because we have seen Rally 1 and Rally 2 cars running with snorkels on Safari for the last couple of years. How do I feel about that? It's tricky, isn't it? Because like I touched on, you should drive to the conditions, shouldn't you? So if you're on an extremely rough event, you should drive at a pace that doesn't risk the car. Similarly, if you're in Monte Carlo and it's icy and changeable roads, you should take that into account, shouldn't you? So you can't go barreling into a corner at 120 kilometers an hour knowing that there might be black ice there. You have to take that into account and adapt your speed to suit, don't you? So I do subscribe to that argument, and we do have to be mindful of costs. I think it was pretty shocking that Oliver Solberg justified the additional Safari parts by saying the cars cost €1.5 million anyway, so what does it matter? I mean, that's a shocking figure, isn't it, for a rally car, €1.5 million. From next year, obviously, it's going to be very different. We're going to move into an era of cost-capped Rally 1 cars, which are supposed to cost more like €340,000, which is about the same price as a Rally 2 car. So the cost thing, in terms of the overall cost, I do think becomes a little bit academic because things are changing so much next year. I don't know. I think while I do believe that you should drive to the conditions, I also think rallying has to be very mindful of the cool factor, because again, you know, just like the scenery, just like the backdrops and all of that stuff and all of the different conditions, the changing appearance of the cars and having specialist cars, for me at least, is part of the appeal. You know, I'm happy to admit that I'm a tarmac fan. You know, I love tarmac rallies, and one of the things I love about it is how the cars look. You know, they have bigger wheels, lower ride heights, and for me, they look at their absolute best when they're on tarmac, really racy, and they look fantastic. But at the same time, I can also appreciate how good a car looks when it's in safari spec. You know, if you look at the cars from last weekend with the maxed out ride heights and the snorkels and things, and if you go back in the past and you had bull bars and extra bits, even though the Skodas were running bull bars this year, that again, you know, that in its own way is really cool, isn't it? And it adds an extra element. You know, if you're trying to attract people to the sport and they see pictures of a Toyota Yaris or a Skoda Fabia with bull bars and snorkels and things on it, they're going to be like, what is this? I have to know more about it. So I think we need to be a little bit careful. So I understand where the FIA are coming from in terms of not wanting to increase costs, but I also think, you know, ultimately, if we're talking about changing the shape of the front bumper a little bit, or we're talking about, you know, changing the design of the front wishbones, for example, is that increase in cost really that problematic? You know, I think if those parts become part of an optional kit that someone can purchase to do the Safari Rally, they're only eligible on the Safari Rally or maybe on a number of rallies, it doesn't actually impact anyone else, does it? So if you're, you know, Joe Blogs and you compete in the UK or in Ireland or France and you only do tarmac rallies, you don't have to buy the Safari kit for your GR Yaris Rally 2 or for your Fiesta Rally 2 or whatever it is. So in a way, it doesn't matter, you know. So I think we can make it an optional kit. Even if you're competing in WRC 2, you don't have to do the Safari Rally, do you? So you don't have to incur that additional cost of buying that Safari spec kit. So I think it could be managed in such a way where the cost thing is not much of a problem, but you still get the benefits of having the cool factor of having those specialist cars that look a bit different and make people ask questions and make people get interested in the sport. So I think I would call, to try and summarise this, because I've been rabbiting on, which I tend to do, I think we need to have a little bit of flexibility here. I think we need to be flexible in terms of the events. So I think we do need, for certain events at least, I think we do need to drop this 3-day cloverleaf, let's do everything in a formulaic 300 kilometres of stages kind of a way. We do need to give a bit of flexibility to try and make more interesting events and to make certain events really stand out for their uniqueness and for their unique character. And I also think we need a bit of flexibility with the cars. You know, we need to attract people, and the cars are one of the major things that attract people. And if putting a bull bar and a snorkel on a car makes people think, whoa, what's that? I want to have a look. Then, you know, why not? Why not do that? You know, I think rallying is going through such a difficult period right now. Yes, the audience figures aren't bad, but we're struggling to get manufacturers involved. We're struggling to reach people. There is an awful lot of people out there that still don't really know what the WRC is. There are a lot of motorsport fans who still don't really understand rallying. So I think we have to find ways to reach out to people, and cars piling through the mud and really struggling to get through stages like they did on last weekend's Safari Rally. Those types of events are a perfect way to do that. They are a perfect way to get people involved, because they're dramatic, aren't they? And that is what motorsport is all about. People want dramatic. So I'm going to stop rabbiting on, because, as I said, I've been talking too much. Let me know in the comments what you think below. Do you think it's time to move away from the cloverleaf format and to try and let events to do something different? And do you think we should have specialist specifications of cars for different types of events? Do let me know what you think of that. While you're there, make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons, as I always say. And other than that, I will just say thank you for watching, and I will see you again in the next video.